Great, we'll get started. There's a recording of this as always. It's going to go up onto our YouTube channel as the other two have already. So if you do miss out or have any colleagues or members of the team that want to have a look, just jump up onto our YouTube channel and that'll be available. There'll be a little link at the end for that channel as well. Welcome everybody to our final installment of our scenarios webinars. And I think for the first two sessions, we covered the opening position and the proposition. And today we're going to look at exporting reports and getting a start or having a look at how to get a start on planning a 12-month budget. So for those of you who haven't been tuning in, who don't know who I am, my name is Sudeshwan Mudali. I'm part of the customer success team and a partner success manager. So some of the partners advisors on the line, you might know me, and for anybody else, you'll see me on the chat bubble from time to time. So a quick overview of what we're going to look at today. I'll do a brief recap of session 2. I know it's been over the weekend, so we'll go quickly over what we covered and where to find the video for that. Then we'll take a look at how to use reports and have a look at some of the visual indicators we have available in that report section. And then that'll wrap up scenarios. Not a lot left to look at in that. And then we'll jump across or take a look at how to export some reports first, but then we'll jump across into the planning grid. And we'll take a look at how to use a planning grid and how to use distribution curves to try and start to bring some of those insights or some of those annual values you've generated in the report into your budget to spread out over the upcoming 12 months. And then of course, we'll break for a little bit of Q&A at the end. As always, if you do have some questions, pop them into the Q&A. I don't have a helper today on their Q&A, so it might just sit there for a little bit. But if you do have to leave early or you want to get your question in, chuck it in there. Otherwise, hold it over to the end and we can share it out with everyone else as well. Awesome. So without further ado, I'll just switch my screen over. Here we go now. Everyone should be able to see that. And so we'll hop into our scenario. We could take it straight into our proposition. Great, so I'll just collapse these over for a second and then we'll go over a quick recap. So on Friday's session, we took a look at how we build out our proposition, how we add new proposition items. And that was obviously our assets above the blue line, our liabilities below the blue line, so the ability to sell and value assets and restructure and do early repayment or change repayment terms for your loans. On the income side, we looked at what was brought in from the importing of those operational trackers from the main part of Figured, but also how to manipulate them, add new insights, but also how to create new ones as well. And for the advisors on the line, it'd be great to have a look at that previous video if you missed it, because we covered a good part on being able to create status quo scenarios without having to do full stock recs. So it's ability to capture the amount of stock you have on hand and keep that constant over the life of the scenario while still managing to bring in your net sales as well using another income chart of account code. Now that does sound completely new to you, but something like you do want to do, go and check out the video. We won't have enough time to go through it today, but the video breaks it down in quite a lot of detail. On the expense side, we looked at how to spread our farm working expenses, which was that expense position that we imported in. Also how to spread by percentages as well. And then we took a brief look at all the other areas we put in there, like lease and rent, interest, personal drawings, etc. So the two callouts in that area there is the overdraft tab that sits under interest. So under interest here, you have an overdraft tab to be able to maintain your overdraft. And a new addition to scenarios is the automatic taxation. That's just taking your net profit before tax, applying an effective tax rate percentage to it to work out your tax expense. Awesome. Having a mail with my Figured just now. Apologies for that. The joys of all of us sharing internet, I'm sure. Just give that a second to refresh and we'll jump back into it. So while it's figuring out what it's trying to do with themselves, again, apologies for that. I'm not sure what's going on with the internet at the moment. Take a quick look over at some of the other options that we have here. So I would have done this at the end, but for any of you aren't aware, we've got our live chat available. So that's anywhere on your Figured application or on the Figured website. On the bottom right, you've got a chat bubble for live chat. Click on that and you'll be able to reach out to our customer success team. And they're available 8:30 or usually 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. And our video tutorials that I keep referencing, that is on our YouTube channel. So just head over to YouTube and just type in Figured and you'll be able to work your way through the videos in there. It's a really, really good starting point as well because it's got all our old webinars on there as well. So last year we did a webinar run for about, I think, 2 weeks with some really, really good content that went into planning and valuations, etc. And then our blog as well, which is another great place to go. And so you can find some good reads on here. So good case studies here on how to plan for the future. And we've also added some new ones in for scenarios as of today, I think, as well. So let's take a look back over at Figured if it decided to listen to us. It has, great. So moving back down to the summary page. So on the summary page, like I mentioned the last time, it is a summary report and it's available at the very bottom of your scenario. And so basically what this is that we've got farm summary and financial summary. So the farm summary, if you've taken the time to enter in all of the different metrics throughout the scenario that it asks you for, things like effective area and total area of your rural property, your milking platform, things like that, it's going to be able to work out peak cows, so on and so forth. It's going to be able to work out some good production metrics off of that. If you haven't taken the time to enter those in, just ignore them and move past them, as they probably won't make too much sense. On the financial summary side, this is kind of where we're trying to get into. Yeah, this is where we're trying to get into. And so at the very top, we've got our income. And then below that, we've got some farm working expenses. We have an EBIT line as well. And the main thing to keep in mind here is that this isn't a top-down calculation. So when I say a top-down calculation is the areas you see in light are not what's made up of the total that's shown in bold. So it is part of the calculation, but it's not everything. So with it being a summary report, we don't put every single item that makes up that the total areas that's available on the full end report. So if you do get confused with that, jump over into the main reports, which is what we're about to do, and we can look at all of the components that make up, for example, net cash movement or gross farm income. Here's just a highlight reel of the important areas, so you can take a look, move back up the scenario, make some adjustments, come back down, and kind of get your numbers right without having to reload the scenarios page each time. So as we scroll down, we see some handy little bits of info. So at the bottom here is another new little addition. I think I did cover it briefly in the last session, but we'll go over in detail now. And it's just the ability to add notes. So previously in your scenario, you weren't able to add any specific notes into any area. You had to maybe export it out or add some notes in another way. But now having this in here means that you can add in assumptions, especially if you're working remotely like we are now. We've got one scenario, but multiple contributors to that scenario. This notes area is a great way to put some initial notes in after maybe say the banker works on it or an accountant works on it. And you can also have the option to surface those on reports. So if you are the sole user of the scenario and you're actually sending reports out to the team for analysis, you can then add these summaries onto that as well. Awesome. So I'll click next and that'll move us over into reports. So on the bottom left, I can click next. So that's just there because I hadn't saved my notes. And that now takes us over to the reports page. So while that loads, the first thing we can see now is we've got a few different reports. The first that loads up is the summary report. So it is a report, so we'll show on this page as well. And then we have a P&L, cash flow, balance sheet, and a livestock summary. What we also do have is indicators. So by collapsing this reports, I also show indicators just here as well. So I'll expand that. And what indicators are, just a visual representation of some of the insights that are shown on the reports. So depending on how you like to absorb information or whether it is you're showing this out to a team of people, the indicators are a good way to be able to sort of look at different trends growing within the scenario. So once again, at the top, we have those those farm summary stats. If you've taken the time to enter in those pieces of information, then it's going to make a lot of sense. So as you can see here, we have taken the time to put in peak cows, the effective area, plus the milking platform, how many, and then it shows you here production per cow, so on and so forth. So good, it's good statistics, and if it fits you, I definitely recommend using it. If not, we've got some other great visual indicators down here as well, such as closing cash position. So they're very quickly and visually, we can see how that cash position changes over the life of the scenario versus having to look at it in a broken down report. And the same goes for the rest of those graphs as well. Things like principal interest cover, equity percentage and position, and also net profit as well. Great, so we'll collapse that down and we'll open up reports and take a closer look at what we're working with in reports. So we'll start with the cash flow first. So we got the way the reports work are all the same. So we'll take a look at one and then just flip through the others afterwards. So with the cash flow report, everything comes in collapsed as first. And again, here you have the ability to add notes. Now, if I start expanding those out, here's where we finally start to see some of that detail that's been held back from us at the other parts of the scenario. So what you may or may not have noticed is as you enter various bits of information, it's not immediately clear what the end result calculation is, especially when you get into specific areas such as deferred payments, for example, as well. But once we're in here and we start to expand these areas out, we can start to look a lot closer at some of these income areas. Here we can see the difference between milk and deferred income. On the other income area, that also breaks out some direct costs there as well. Then your operating expenses, it really breaks itself down. And we can expand each of these areas and take a look at what that is. Now, obviously, the values that you're seeing in each of those 5 columns are annual values for across the 5 years of the scenario, but be able to have just that extra bit of granularity, around what makes up operating expenses, for example, is really, really handy. And the interest that's broken down by each of your term loans that you have. On personal drawings, it's just the one line, of course, and a few non-operating movements down there as well. So as you can see, once you get to the reports area, it finally starts to make a lot of sense as in what makes up all the various different parts of the scenario. And it's obviously an area where you can then gain some insights, head back into the proposition, make those changes and come back here and take another look as well. Now a similar sort of methodology applies for profit and loss and balance sheet as well. So the reports work exactly the same. And they're shown as completely collapsed over, and you just have the ability to open them out and take a look. And here we're broken down by current and non-current. And same with your liabilities as well. So a lot more insight available on these reports. And this is kind of where you will also start to take these insights and put it back into the planning route, which is what we're going to take a look at next. And the final report here is a livestock summary. And this is, again, similar to the stock rec that you'll be used to seeing for the figured users are on the line as well. So if you've been using your operational tracker for livestock or for any stock for that matter, you will see something very similar to that. So this is where we surface that same stock rec again. However, of course, as you will remember from the last session, we decided not to enter any movements into our tracker and just use opening numbers to maintain that capital value and enter our net livestock sales into other income. So because of that, our stock rec is empty. However, if you have taken the time to enter in movements, this is where these movements will show. And you have the toggle to move between the various years of the scenario. And the final area is export. So you can either access that by you clicking the next on the bottom right, or as I did just then, I clicked on the actual breadcrumb trail at the top. So on the export is the final window of the scenario. And here we have a few basic options, and these are the ability to export to PDF. So all the reports we've just looked at, summary, P&L, cash flow, indicators report as well, and the balance sheet and the livestock summary are all able to be exported to PDF. You also have the ability to mark the scenario as complete. So that doesn't do anything to the actual accessibility and usability of the scenario. Instead, it just adds a green tick on the main scenarios window. So if you're working with multiple scenarios on a farm operation, or whatever the use case may be, really, you can just see which scenarios have either been marked as completed or have been done in the minds of the team that you're working. Now, a question that we do get, or you probably have on your mind right now, is why is there only ability to export to PDF? Obviously, with the insights that have been gained from the scenario, it would be really great to be able to put some of those insights either into a CSV or into some sort of method to use it back into the planning grid. And so the short answer to that is that's what we're working on right now. So for those of you that have been on this journey with us a bit longer, we've put a lot of work into scenarios in the last 12 to 18 months. Things like, really increasing the UI, adding in some more auto calculations, and the biggest one being the ability to import. So about a year ago, there was no ability to import, and so that's been a really big change for us. And we're working on something similar to this particular screen, or just a capability at the end of the scenario. So the ability to move that back into planning and just do a lot more from a figured perspective with the data. So hold tight, that's coming soon. But for now, you can export that to PDF and share that out. What we will look at though now, before we move on, is how to take some of these insights back into planning. But before I move on, I'll just break for 30 seconds, just to see if anybody has any questions that cover what I've just gone over now, or anything about scenarios before we jump into the planning grid and take a quick look at distribution curves and planning. Awesome. If anybody does have any or hasn't finished typing it, just go ahead and pop that in. We'll come back to it at the end. So what I'm going to sort of take a look at now is a way to be able to, oh wait, we do have a question. Okay, let's have a look at the balance sheet, and specifically around how dairy cattle on hand will flow through. I assume we're talking about this line here. Again, I think in this, unless I'm a little off the ball here, but I assume you're looking at how this will display on the balance sheet. Again, like I said, because we haven't put any movements in and we've just maintained those opening numbers, the value's going to stay the same across the life of it. So here is where you would see the value jumping around if you had brought in all of the stock movements in and out, either through aging, so on and so forth as well. Great, that's awesome. Great, we do have a question. I will hold that question just towards the end. If we can take a look at here. Oh, when you export, do you mark it as complete? Can you go back if you made the error? Yes, you definitely can. So with the marking as complete, it's got no bearing on the export itself or any of the functionality in there as well. So if I had to go back to that export window, and I can say, mark the scenario as complete. That's really all it does. It just adds that green bar there, and then on the main window of the scenario, it'll show it as that. So there's nothing else going on. It doesn't stop you from exporting, or doesn't enable the ability to export, or doesn't stop you from editing the scenario in any kind of way. So don't worry about that too much. Mark it as complete. It's just a sense check mentally to know that you've been through that and it's done. Awesome. So what I will do now is we'll just head over into our planning grid. And just before we finish off, I just want to show you guys a way to be able to take some of these annual values that you're seeing and be able to spread it if you've had the establishment of distribution curves. So I'll just set this up. So basically, the next place we're going to look into is the planning grid. So over on the left-hand side, expand your menu, click down on planning, and head into the planning grid. And we have a new feature that we released called distribution curves. So basically what it means is that, actually, if I take a step back, on our new rolling plan feature, which is the new planning option that we have, that is our rolling forecast. So that way we only have actuals or forecast. If that doesn't make any sense to you, then reach out to us via the green bubble, or jump onto the YouTube channel and have a look at what rolling plan is. And this will make a little more sense. I think it might be slightly out of scope if I go over it here. But the short of it is that we've now released the ability to create snapshots instead of budgets. And so these snapshots are created at the beginning of the year. And they can be created using any amount of previous data you've had in Figured. So if I had to go ahead here and say, take a snapshot, I can create my data with any previous Figured data set. That can be a full set of actuals for the previous year, or a full set of forecasts for the previous year, or a combination of the two. And those get set as an annual plan. You can take as many snapshots as you want, but the snapshot that gets saved as your annual plan, that allows you to then create a distribution curve for the following year. And so what I mean by that is in the very first year after you've taken your first snapshot, we give you the ability to spread values in the planning grid based on the curve that was created from last year's spread. So for example, last year, say you had a spread like what we're seeing just here. When you created that snapshot, we'll save that spread as a distribution curve, which means in your new year, you can spread across the entire year using the same curve that was used last year. So it also creates a really good, a nice way to be able to bring annual values from the scenario tool in here to be able to spread. So if we get to look at that, if I had to click on into one of my planning grid areas here, like I just did the cell, I have the ability down here to do a few different things in terms of spreading values annually. And one of those is the ability to spread. Now, if I clicked on any random option here and I go spread, it shows me monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly. So that's our standard options that you would have in the planning grid. However, if you've got saved information in last year's snapshot for that particular chart of account code, like we do for animal health, if I clicked in here, animal health did have values last year and it was saved in a snapshot. If I now click on that same option, I'm given another fourth option called curve. And so that way there's a curve saved, as it shows just there. This amount, the amount for this count will be proportionally spread according to your most recent annual plan. So that's exactly what I just said now. And so if we take that logic and we go back over into the scenario and we search down, we say, all right, let's try and find animal health. And so for the first year of the scenario for 2020, animal health has come up to $20,543. So if I head over here and I say $20,543, and I had that curve option, when I hit spread, it's now taken that same amount and spread it over the remaining months of the year according to how it was spread last year. And so that's really powerful. If you've if your current annual plan is based off last year and that's kind of what you thought was a decent year, then the ability to then take an annual value and spread it that way, it's not only are you using last year's assumptions that are fairly close to accurate on-farm activities, but you're actually really quickening up the process to be able to enter this information in the first place. So instead of having to sit in here and go back and forth and figure out, okay, which months of last year did it spike or why did it spike? You can use this curve option and just do it really quickly and then just make little tweaks should they need to be made. If we look at another option as well, and a quick way to check this is to click down here and see if you have the curve option enabled. I know, maybe cartage and spreading is another one that's got there. So if I had to say, look, cartage and spreading over the course of last year, I'm not sure if we have an entry here for that. But if we took freight in Korea, for example, it's 10,802, and go in here and say 10,802, and spread by curve, and there you go. In this particular case, all that was saved last year was two payments throughout the year in September and February that made up the entirety of that amount. So straight over here, we can kind of see the value, and as you start to and for those of you who aren't on rolling plan, once you get onto rolling plan, as you start to really get going with this new way of planning, and you take those snapshots and you take those annual plans snapshots as well, the following year's planning directly after that, you're going to start to see a lot of value. And this isn't exactly how it's going to play out for Figured, but for example, this is how we would potentially bring data back in, is use these already established distribution curves and pull them in here as well. So another benefit of these curves is if you've already got curves saved in a snapshot, when you choose to import data for that year, it'll bring those curves into the scenario as well. For example, your milk curve from the track will be brought in, but for expenses, it'll also bring that curve in as well, and then maintain that curve when we bring it back into planning. So hopefully that gives you guys a starting point to be able to bring some of those values from the scenario, those annual values from the scenario into the planning grid and start spreading those over and creating those plans and quickening up that time. And for those of you that aren't on rolling plan, definitely reach out to us and have a chat. Or for the farmers on the line, reach out to your advisors, as they're all quite aware about it, and have a chat about how you can switch over to a rolling plan. Awesome. So that was a quick little look at how that works. We'll break again for some questions. I'm assuming some of you might have some after seeing that. We actually have a new blog post up today on scenarios. We have 2 new blog posts up there today, but the one specifically on scenarios for the advisors on the line, it's a great article to be able to send out to your client base as well, and just kind of get them with the wording and stuff of it as well. It's good to get them involved and kind of see from a higher level, what are scenarios and how is it beneficial? And then obviously with that new access you have to Financial Farmer to just be able to showcase that as well. So we don't seem to have any questions coming in just yet. That does bring us to the end of the scenario. Apologies again for being a little bit late and it's and the format being slightly a roundabout way, but we got through some good content today, and hopefully you guys can start to take these insights from the scenarios, put it back into planning, or just start to do a whole lot of really interesting stuff with it. And we hope it helps you through this time. As I mentioned, this will go up onto our YouTube channel very shortly to be able to view, and do keep an eye out either in your emails or your in-app messages for Figured, or just on our website for more webinars coming up soon. So we're going to have some webinars potentially starting next week, I think, as well. So tune into those, get registered. No problem, Mary, my pleasure. And yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you do need a recording of the webinar, it's on our YouTube. Thanks again and have a great day.